Today we'll be reading Susan B. Anthony, Champion of Women's Rights, the chapter called Long Division. School was nearly over for the summer when the Anthonys arrived in Battenville. Mother decided she'd teach the children at home until the winter term began. Susan was disappointed. Abby had told her all about the good times they had at noon recess, eating lunch together and playing games. Not many boys come to school in summertime, Abby went on. They're too busy in the farms. And we have a woman to teach us. We take our sewing to school. Don't you have the same teacher in the winter? Susan asked in surprise. Goodness, no. A woman could never make the big boys behave. We have a schoolmaster then. He's cross and he has a big bundle of switches, and he uses every one of them too. Oh, Susan said, you can't scare me. But she wasn't quite so sure about that when the time came for winter school. Suppose she couldn't sit as still as the schoolmaster expected her to. Suppose she missed all her lessons. She was shivering as she and Grandma started for the little schoolhouse on the edge of the town. No, said the schoolteacher. She soon found that she needn't have worried. Only a few girls came to school during the winter term, and most of these stayed home on the stormy days. As for the few who were there, as long as they kept quiet, the schoolmaster paid very little attention to them. He would set them a sentence to copy on their slates. Once a day he would call them before his desk to read, but most of the time he spent teaching the boys. Susan didn't see why she couldn't study what the boys did. Grandmother Anthony had taught her A-B Abes when she was 3 years old. It was boring to sit and listen when the other girls worried over the first lesson in their blue-backed spellers. Oh my, I may not get it the way... Oh may I not go the way of sin, Abby read with much stumbling. When Susan's turn came, she would turn halfway through the book to the story of the bad boys and the farmer. If good words and gentle means will not reclaim the wicked, then they must be dealt with in a more severe manner, read Susan without a single mistake. The boys were studying long division. Susan was sure that she would like that. It sounded hard. She liked to do hard things. But Abby had been right when she said that the schoolmaster was cross and crabbed. He would use his ruler on the little girl's hands as well as the little boys. For a long time she was afraid to ask him anything. At last she got up her courage one day when school was over. The boys had raced through the door with whoops and shouts. The girls hadn't been far behind. Susan went up to the schoolmaster's desk. She waited while he put his books away. Her heart was in her mouth. At last he looked up. What is it, Susan? Susan tried to be very, very polite. She bobbed a little curtsy. Please, I want to learn long division with the boys. The schoolmaster looked at her. Then he laughed. Nonsense! What use has a girl for long division? Some of the boys won't have a use for it. That's different. They're boys. If they can learn it, so can I. The schoolmaster closed his desk with a bang. Fumadiddles, he said. Then, as Susan's eyes filled with tears, he added more kindly, You mustn't worry your little head about such things. My child, if a girl learns to read her Bible and count her egg money, that's all she needs to know. Run along now. Yes, said Susan. Susan ran along. Grandma was waiting. Hurry up, slowpoke, said Grandma. I'll race you to the old town pump. The last one there is an old cow's tail. Susan started to run, but her mind wasn't on the race. Grandma won so easily she was puzzled. What's the matter with you? She asked. Susan didn't answer. Hannah asked the same thing that night when Susan, helping her to undress, forgot to take off her shoes. Again, Susan didn't explain. The next morning, when she set the table for breakfast without putting on any knives or forks, Mother said firmly, No one can think of two things at once. You must keep your mind on the task before you, Susan. Mother was right, and that was exactly what Susan was doing. But the task before her wasn't running a race or undressing Hannah or setting the table. It was finding a way to study long division. The next morning was cold and blustery. The wind whistled down the chimney until the fire danced. It will be worse at school, said Grandma, because our wood there is green. Besides, there is a crack nearly an inch wide under the window where Susan and I sit. Brr, but we're going to be cold. Won't the schoolmaster let you come up to the fire long enough to get warm? Father asked. Sometimes, but then we just feel colder than ever when we go back to our seats. Oh, said Susan. What's the matter, said Grandma. You just gave me an idea, that's all. A plan works. The girls met Abby as they started off to school. Abby was cheerful. It looks as if it might sleet or snow any minute, and sometimes the wind blows the sleet down the schoolroom chimney so hard it puts out the fire. Then we can all go home. Susan didn't want that to happen today. It would spoil her plan. She looked at the fire anxiously as soon as they reached the schoolhouse. When the wind whistled down the chimney, it sent spurts of smoke out over the schoolroom. But the fire didn't go out. As the boys piled on more wood, it grew hotter and hotter. Grandma had been right about the cold coming in through the crack under the window. Susan could feel it blowing down her back. Her feet became cakes of ice. She stood it, though, until the schoolmaster called the boys to his desk for their arithmetic lesson. Then she raised her hand. May I go to the fire, she asked. Nearly every little girl on the back bench had been up to the fire at least once during the morning. The schoolmaster nodded his head. He didn't notice that when Susan came up, she carried her slate with her. The schoolmaster's desk was near the fireplace. She could hear every word he said to the boys. When he gave them an example to work on, she copied it on her slate. She didn't go back to her seat until the arithmetic lesson was over. The other girls were busy filling their slates with the sentence the schoolmaster had set them to copy. Susan worked on her example. She did the same thing day after day. She learned to work harder and harder long division problems. Father is pleased. The next month, one of Grandmother Anthony's friends came to visit. After supper, she and Mother sat by the fire sewing. The girls had their knitting. Father was mending a harness strap. How were the girls getting along with their schooling, asked the old lady. As well as could be expected, I suppose, Mother said. But with only one teacher and 40 pupils from 6 to 16 years old? I can do long division, said Susan unexpectedly. Lands alive, exclaimed their visitor. A girl child learning long division? The schoolmaster must be out of his senses. He doesn't know I've learned it, Susan told her honestly. Let's see you do an example, said Father. His tone was quiet. Susan looked at him anxiously. Did he, too, think little girls ought not to study long division? Or did he think she was boasting? But when she got her slate and rested it against his knee, he smiled. That meant he wasn't angry. Good. Do you want a long problem or a short one, Father? Asked Susan as he took the slate pencil. Please, a long one, answered Susan. She worked the example he set her. It was a hard one, too. Then she worked another. Titch, titch, said the little old lady. But Father was pleased. When God gave you a brain, Susan, he expected you to use it. He didn't expect her to get puffed up about it, their guest told him. She isn't puffed up exactly, Father said kindly, but it is only right for her to feel pleased when she has learned to do a hard thing well. Said the old lady. But Susan knew Father was right. She wasn't boastful and puffed up at all. She was only happy. Susan felt happy all over.